It started with a scream. A high-pitched, panicked shriek that cracked through the quiet of a Saturday afternoon, followed by the unmistakable thunder of barking. Not playful barks. No, these were serious, deep-chested warnings. The kind of barking that made you freeze with a soda halfway to your lips, wondering if someone just stepped somewhere they weren't supposed to, and they had, because while I was out of town, driving back from my brother's place 2 cities over, someone had decided to help themselves to my backyard, my pool, and a false sense of entitlement. The someone? Karen, not a Karen. The Karen. The one who lived 2 houses down, the self-declared neighborhood coordinator, a woman who weaponized passive-aggressive smiles and had an uncanny ability to appear the second a trash can was left out too long that I hadn't even been gone 24 hours. See, I'd planned this weekend for weeks. My brother had just moved into a new place with his wife, and they needed help unpacking and setting up furniture. I owed him from the time he helped me build that IKEA bookshelf I'd nearly set on fire trying to assemble on my own, so I packed a bag, tossed some tools into the trunk, and made the 2-hour drive out Friday evening that I left behind 2 things, my house, and my dogs, Thor and Machi. Thor's a 90-pound German shepherd with a heart of gold but a bark that could shatter confidence. Machi's smaller, a mutt with a serious overbite and the speed of a caffeine-fueled toddler. Together, they're sweethearts. To me. To strangers trespassing into their territory? Not so much that I didn't take them with me because they're homebuddies. I have cameras inside and out, set up mostly because I enjoy watching them wrestle like overgrown puppies when I'm away. I also have a friend, Julie, who lives nearby and agreed to swing by in the mornings to feed them and make sure they haven't figured out how to open the fridge again. The house was locked. The dogs were in the backyard with shade, water, toys, and a doggy door into the kitchen. I wasn't worried. That is, until I heard that scream. It came through the security camera speaker, motion detected, auto-recording. I was driving back, halfway through my podcast when I got the notification on my phone. I tapped it at a red light. The screen popped up to a scene so surreal I thought it was a prank at first. There were people in my backyard, adults. 3 or 4 of them, from what I could tell. One of them, a woman in oversized sunglasses and a straw hat, was running toward the gate while flailing her arms like she'd just seen a ghost. Behind her, Thor was barking his head off, not chasing, just holding ground, growling in that guttural way he only does when someone's not supposed to be there. My heart dropped. Not out of fear, but disbelief. I pulled over, watched the rest of the 15-second clip, then immediately called Julie. She picked up on the second ring. Please tell me you didn't give anyone access to my house, I said. What? No. Why, what's going on? I explained what I saw, and she promised to head over immediately. I drove the rest of the way home with every what-if scenario crawling through my head. What if someone had broken in? What if the dogs got out? What if someone got hurt and tried to blame me? What if, God forbid, Karen was involved? Turns out, it was that last one. When I got home about 45 minutes later, Julie was already standing by the curb, arms crossed, a look of complete bewilderment on her face. You are not gonna believe this, she said before I could even park. I saw the video, I replied. What happened? She said she thought you'd be okay with it, Julie said, still staring toward my backyard like she couldn't process it. Karen. She said, and I quote, he doesn't even use the pool, and it's just sitting there. Like that gives her the right to invite people over. I walked to the side gate, already half expecting what I'd find, and sure enough, there were remnants of the world's worst pool party. 2 plastic lawn chairs tipped over. A deflated unicorn float. A spilled bag of tortilla chips that Thor was now sniffing at, eyes full of suspicion. No people, though. Apparently, they'd scattered once Thor started his security routine. The gate had been jimmied open. Not broken, but manipulated. Karen knew the latch system. I'd seen her eyeing it once during one of her infamous sidewalk chats, those weird interrogations disguised as neighborly concern. I checked the security footage again, more calmly this time. The recording showed Karen unlocking the side gate around noon. She looked over her shoulder twice, then waved someone in. 2 more women followed, one holding a cooler, the other carrying a Bluetooth speaker. They set up chairs, laid out towels like they were at a resort, and cranked up some early 2000s pop. It was surreal. At first, Thor and Machi didn't react. They stayed under the patio umbrella, watching. Probably confused, then Karen did something stupid. She walked toward the back door, the one with the doggy door, and bent down to peek inside. That was when Thor stood up. And then Machi did. Karen must have said something like, "It's okay, boys," because she started opening the screen door, and that's when the barking started. She didn't get inside. Thank God. But the moment those dogs realized this stranger was trying to enter the house, their entire demeanor changed. They advanced slowly. Barked louder. Growled when she didn't back up immediately. That's when the screaming started, and the panic followed. Julie and I watched the clips, dumbfounded. "She was trying to enter your house," Julie whispered. "Not just use the pool, she was going to go in." "She probably wanted towels," I muttered, still trying to wrap my head around it. We spent the next hour documenting everything. I saved the security clips, took pictures of the gate, the backyard, the mess. I wasn't trying to make a scene, I just knew people like Karen. People who bend truth into pretzels to suit their own narrative. As if on cue, she appeared. She must have waited until the coast seemed clear, because just as I was about to go inside, I heard the familiar squeak of her sandals behind me. "I just wanted to talk," she said, as if we were old friends. I turned slowly. Julie didn't say anything, but she folded her arms tighter. "You know," Karen continued, "I assumed it would be all right. You're hardly ever in the pool. I figured you wouldn't mind." "You figured wrong," I said flatly. She huffed, genuinely offended. "You don't have to be rude. No harm was done. It's not like I broke anything. You entered my property without permission. With other people. You unlocked my gate. You tried to go into my house." "I didn't go in," she snapped, "but you tried to." She paused then, like she finally realized the gravity of what she'd done. "Those dogs are dangerous," she said, switching gears. "They could have attacked someone." "They didn't," I said. "Because they're trained to defend the property, not mall idiots." Julie coughed to cover a laugh. Karen's jaw twitched. "This doesn't have to be a big deal," she said finally. "Let's just move on." But the thing about people like Karen is, they never think they're wrong. They expect their intentions to excuse their actions. She thought her idea of community sharing meant she could take what wasn't offered, and when consequences came barking, literally, she played the victim. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just told her the truth. "I've got cameras. I've got time-stamped recordings. I've got a neighbor who saw you walk in. Next time, don't assume your convenience outweighs someone else's boundaries." She stared at me like she wanted to say more, but nothing came out. Just that same tight-lipped smile she always gave when she was holding in judgment. Then she turned and walked away. I exhaled, a little heavier than I expected. I wasn't angry, not really. Just stunned. Disappointed. It's wild how quickly people will cross a line when they think they can get away with it. Julie stayed a while longer. We cleaned up the chips, refilled the water bowls, gave Thor and Machi extra treats. They weren't heroes, but they were my dogs. My family. And they did exactly what they were supposed to do. I didn't plan on telling anyone else. But I knew this wasn't over. Because people like Karen don't take boundaries as lessons, they take them as challenges, and something told me this was just the beginning. By Monday morning, I thought it might blow over. Wishful thinking. Karen was back at it before the sun was even high. I'd barely finished brewing my coffee when I saw her pacing along the sidewalk across from my house, phone pressed to her ear, casting frequent glances toward my front yard like she was waiting for the grass to grow in a direction that offended her. She wasn't subtle, either. Her gestures were animated, full of fake shock and dramatic sighs, the way someone talks when they want the neighbors to overhear. I ignored her. Thor and Machi were lounging in the shade again, calm as ever, having already forgotten the weekend chaos. I, on the other hand, had not. I was still a little rattled, not in fear, but frustration. The whole thing had felt like some weird breach of trust with a neighbor I barely knew. Around noon, I finally checked my mailbox and ran into Paul, who lived next door. He was dragging out his trash bin and gave me a curious look. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "Everything all right with Karen?" I raised an eyebrow. "You tell me. She's been complaining to everyone on the block. Says you've got violent dogs and you set them on her. Sounds insane, but she's telling people she might take legal steps. Whatever that means." I sighed. "She broke into my backyard and tried to enter my house." Paul's eyes widened. "You're kidding." "I wish." He gave a short laugh, shook his head, and muttered something about needing popcorn. But I could tell, he wasn't the only one Karen had talked to. By late afternoon, 2 other neighbors had accidentally stopped by, both with awkward small talk that somehow curved into casual questions about Saturday. I kept it polite. I told them the truth. No embellishments. No anger. Just facts. I was out of town, my property was locked, she entered it without permission, and my dogs did exactly what they're supposed to do. But with each conversation, it became clear that Karen was working hard behind the scenes to spin her own version of the story. One where she was some poor, misunderstood woman who thought she had permission and was attacked by aggressive animals. By Tuesday, a printed flyer showed up on a few doorsteps. A printed flyer. It was one of those generic, community awareness notes, the kind that looks like it came from the HOA, but upon closer inspection was just Karen's doing. No official letterhead. No signature. Just statements like, "Be cautious of aggressive dogs in our neighborhood," and "Consider safety when leaving children unattended outdoors." It didn't mention my name directly, but it didn't have to. I stood on my porch holding the paper, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, that quiet, simmering kind of anger. Not the explosive, shout-in-the-street kind, but the deep, exhausted frustration that comes when someone crosses a line and then has the audacity to paint you as the problem. That night, I called Karen. She picked up after 3 rings, chipper like she'd been expecting a compliment. "Hi there. We need to talk," I said. A pause. "Okay, you can't go around spreading lies about what happened. You entered my property without permission. You know that." Another pause, longer this time. Then came the carefully measured tone, the one people use when they want to sound reasonable but still stay on top. "I never meant for things to get out of hand," she said. "But people deserve to feel safe. And, frankly, your dogs scared a lot of us. I mean, they chased people, they barked aggressively. That's dangerous. They're guard dogs, Karen. You weren't supposed to be there. They didn't bite anyone. They didn't even touch anyone. They barked. But the perception of danger is still danger," she said. "What if someone had gotten hurt? What if someone hadn't broken into my yard?" I replied. "What if someone knocked on a door instead of assuming they owned the place?" She didn't like that. Her tone shifted. "Cold now, look," she said, "I'm not trying to cause drama. But if I feel unsafe, or if others feel unsafe, I have every right to speak up." "Then speak up honestly," I said. "Because if this continues, and you keep pushing this narrative, I'm going to have to involve people who won't be as patient as I've been." Click, she hung up. It was subtle at first, the way she escalated things. She started walking her dog, an anxious little poodle named Duke, past my house twice as often. Sometimes pausing near the gate, just long enough to glare in. She stopped saying hello to Julie. Pretended not to hear greetings. She hosted a neighborhood meeting in her driveway with folding chairs and lukewarm lemonade and didn't invite me. Julie went, though. And she filled me in afterward. She tried to spin it like you're paranoid. Said your cameras are invasive, that your dogs are unstable, and that you overreacted to what she called a harmless get-together. Harmless? I muttered. It wasn't even her yard. She's trying to frame it like you're the unapproachable one. Like you're some weird recluse who doesn't like community. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It was bordering on something worse. Then came the animal control visit. Two guys in uniform knocked on my door early Wednesday afternoon. One held a clipboard. The other had a calm but firm expression. We got a report of aggressive animal behavior on the property. He said that. I stared at them, speechless for a moment. You've got to be kidding. They weren't, apparently. Someone, gee, I wonder who, had submitted a complaint. Said the dogs were a danger to the neighborhood, described the incident as an attack. I invited them into the backyard. Thor and Machi trotted up, tails wagging, tongues out. I showed them the fence, the locked gate, the doggy door, the security cams. I even offered to play the footage. One of them watched silently, nodding. The other smiled a little when Thor flopped onto his side like a lazy rug. We're not seeing anything here that violates code, the first one finally said. These dogs seem well socialized, and from the footage, they didn't approach until the intruder made contact with the door. I nodded, trying not to show how relieved I was, but, he added, if more complaints are made, we'll have to document them. Just giving you a heads up. They left professionally. Kindly. But the message was clear. Karen wasn't letting this go. That night, I sat on the couch and thought about what to do. I didn't want drama. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to be left alone. But clearly, that wasn't an option anymore. I called Julie again. You still got the number for that mediator lady from the HOA? I asked. Yeah. You thinking about filing something? Not yet, I said. But I'm thinking it's time I stop waiting for her to back off. Julie was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stuck with me. You know, people like her, they double down when they're cornered. But they're not used to being calmly and completely outmaneuvered. Do this smart. I nodded. And no more waiting. No more hoping she'd get bored and find a new target. It was time to set boundaries that actually held. Because I wasn't just defending my dogs or my yard anymore. I was defending the basic right to not be manipulated by someone who thought politeness was a weakness. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I was planning clarity, and I knew exactly where to start. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, nothing about Karen scared me, but because I'd hit the point where irritation turned into resolve. There's a quiet kind of fury that comes when someone repeatedly disrespects your boundaries under the mask of concern or community. Karen didn't come over yelling or throwing things. She didn't threaten me outright. But what she did do, misrepresent the truth, manipulate neighbors, and paint herself as the victim, was just as calculated, just as insidious. So I started with what I knew, facts. Thursday morning, I sat down at the dining table, pulled out my laptop, and started organizing everything. Security camera footage, time stamps, call logs, even the flyers she'd distributed, which Julie had kept and handed me. I made a clean timeline. The first entry, Friday, 9:07 p.m., I leave home, dogs secured, gate locked. Saturday, 12:14 p.m., Karen enters my backyard uninvited. Saturday, 12:22 p.m., she attempts to open my back door. Saturday, 12:24 p.m., dogs react, no contact, no injuries. Saturday, 12:38 p.m., Karen and guests leave in a panic. Monday, community flyers appear. Tuesday, HOA driveway meeting. Wednesday, animal control shows up. It was a pattern. And it told a story far clearer than her version. Next, I scheduled a meeting with Lisa, the HOA's dispute resolution coordinator. She wasn't always involved, most neighbor issues fizzled out before reaching her, but I figured this one warranted her attention. I emailed her first, gave her a short, polite summary, and she replied the same afternoon with a slot available the next morning. I wasn't sure what to expect. HOA folks could go either way, too soft or too strict. But Lisa surprised me. She was calm, fair, and most importantly, she listened. I explained the situation without dramatics. I told her how Karen entered my yard while I was out of town, how my dogs responded appropriately, how I returned home to neighborhood gossip and indirect accusations. I showed her a few clips and the timeline. Lisa leaned back in her chair, arms folded, and sighed. This isn't the first time someone's brought up concerns about Karen, she said carefully. But this is the first time someone's brought receipts. I didn't smile. I just said, I'm not trying to escalate anything. I just want her to stop. She nodded. Understood. Would you be willing to join a mediated conversation? I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was another of Karen's passive-aggressive circles. But a mediated setting meant witnesses, structure, and, most importantly, a neutral third party. Yes, I said. As long as there are ground rules. Friday afternoon, we sat in folding chairs in the HOA office across from the clubhouse. Neutral ground. Lisa sat between us. Karen walked in with a cardigan tied around her shoulders like she was auditioning for a country club commercial. She gave me the faintest smile. The kind you give someone moments before telling them their recycling bins are 2 inches too far left. Lisa began, laying down the rules. One person talks at a time, no interruptions, keep it factual. Karen went first. She started by explaining that she thought my pool was available for neighbors, not that I ever said so, but she claimed I'd once joked about never using it anyway. Then she talked about how aggressively the dogs barked, how threatened she felt, and how she was just trying to bring the community together. It was all worded carefully. No outright lies, just twisted interpretations meant to put her in the best light. When it was my turn, I kept my voice level. I walked Lisa and Karen through the footage, step by step. I paused it when Karen opened my gate. When she gestured for her friends to follow. When she attempted to open the back door. When the dogs barked but never crossed the line that I didn't embellish. I didn't get emotional. I just showed what happened. Karen shifted in her seat. Lisa turned to her. Did you have permission to enter his property? Karen shrugged. I assumed. No, Lisa interrupted, gently but firmly. Did he say yes? Karen's lips tightened. No, but I didn't think. Lisa raised a hand. Karen, we have to work with what's factual here. The next 20 minutes were uncomfortable. Karen deflected, suggested I was antisocial, said she felt I was being unneighborly. Lisa stayed neutral but didn't let her spin too far. In the end, Karen was told, clearly, that her actions were not only inappropriate but also potentially in violation of community rules. She was advised to refrain from future flyers, uninvited entries, or making indirect accusations to other residents. The message was clear. Enough. After the meeting, Karen didn't say goodbye. She walked out stiffly, her jaw clenched like she'd been handed a parking ticket she couldn't argue. I exhaled slowly. Not because I'd won, but because it was finally documented. The next few days were quiet. No flyers. No driveway chats. No suspicious dog walk-by glares. Karen still existed 2 houses down, but she'd retreated. The weirdest part? The shift with the neighbors. Paul knocked on my door Saturday afternoon with a 6-pack. Just figured you might want some company, he said. Also, I owe you an apology. For what? For believing her even for 5 minutes. He scratched the back of his neck. It just sounded so crazy at first. But when Lisa filled some of us in, yeah. Not cool. We should have asked you first. It's fine, I said. Thanks for saying that. Later, I walked the dogs around the block like I always did. Thor strutted. Machi trotted with his usual derpy smile. A couple of neighbors waved this time. One even said, "Good boys," as we passed. Karen, of course, didn't come out, but she didn't have to. I wasn't looking for apologies from her anymore. Just space, the kind of space that comes when people finally understand that being neighborly doesn't mean pretending fences don't exist. It was over, or at least, it felt that way. But as I watched Thor sniff a flower bed and Machi chase a leaf like it was a squirrel, I realized something else. You can't control people. But you can control how you protect your peace, and mine was finally intact. At least for now. The first sign that something had truly shifted came the following Monday morning. I stepped out to grab the newspaper, a habit I hadn't broken despite getting news on my phone, and noticed Karen's driveway was unusually empty. No yoga mat rolled out on the porch. No community garden sign sitting crooked in the flower bed. Even Duke, her neurotic little poodle, was nowhere in sight. That I stood for a moment, half expecting her blinds to twitch open. But nothing moved. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she was taking a breather. Either way, the silence was a relief. For the first time in over a week, the neighborhood actually felt like a neighborhood again. Calm, familiar, unbothered. That I went about my day like normal. Fed the dogs. Answered emails. Fixed the loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen I'd been putting off. Life, for the most part, returned to its natural rhythm. But under it all, a faint tension remained. Not the tension of conflict anymore, but the kind that lingers after a storm has passed, when everything is still standing, but you're not quite sure what comes next. Later that afternoon, I was pulling weeds in the front yard when I heard footsteps approaching on the sidewalk. I looked up, half expecting another passive-aggressive encounter, but it was Lisa. She wasn't dressed in her usual HOA business casual attire. Just jeans and a simple tee. A neighbor, not a mediator. "Hey," she said with a small smile. "Got a minute?" I nodded and wiped my hands on my jeans. "I just wanted to follow up," she said. "Karen called me yesterday. Apparently, she's taking a step back from her HOA activities." I raised an eyebrow. She didn't say much, just that she felt the climate had changed, and that it was time for her to refocus elsewhere. "Refocus," I repeated. Lisa smiled faintly. "Yeah. Whatever that means. But unofficially, it sounds like she got the message." I nodded, not quite sure how to respond. Part of me had expected more, some dramatic confrontation, another twist, but the anticlimax was somehow better. Calmer. "Cleaner." "I appreciate you stepping in," I said finally. "Could have gone worse." Lisa shrugged. "Honestly, you handled it better than most would have. Karen's used to getting her way through suggestion and pressure. She doesn't know what to do with someone who just sticks to the truth." After she left, I stood in the yard a while longer, letting the sun warm the back of my neck. There was nothing more to fix, nothing left to say. The fences were still standing, the grass still growing, the dogs still dozing in the shade like nothing ever happened. That night, I grilled dinner out back, nothing fancy, just chicken and corn. The dogs lounged at my feet, hopeful for scraps, ears perked any time I moved toward the cutting board. It was a simple evening, but after the past week, it felt like luxury. Around dusk, Paul stopped by with his wife, Lena. They brought over a small plate of brownies and a cooler of sodas. "Peace offering," Lena said with a sheepish grin. "We figured you deserved one." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said, genuinely surprised. "No, but we sat back while Karen stirred the pot," Paul said. "We should have stepped in sooner. Instead, we let her fill in the blanks." "It's all good," I said. "Things are settled now." "Still," Lena added, "if you ever throw a real pool party, we promise to wait for an invite." That actually made me laugh. "Deal. Just don't bring a Bluetooth speaker." We sat outside for a bit longer, chatting about harmless things, weather, local traffic, some new diner that opened up down the road. Thor eventually pressed his head into Paul's leg, demanding scratches, while Machi tried to sneak onto Lena's lap. The mood was light. Normal. Exactly what I'd been hoping for all along. As they left, Lena turned back and said, "You know, those dogs of yours? They're like neighborhood guardians now." I glanced at the two of them, snoring in a heap by the back door. "They're just doing their job," I said. The next morning, Karen was still quiet. No early morning prancing down the sidewalk. No flyers taped to the mailbox stands. I wouldn't say she disappeared. She still existed in the neighborhood, still took Duke out for late evening walks, but something in her demeanor had changed. She didn't stop to chat anymore. No unsolicited comments about lawn care. No cold smiles or passive digs. She had retreated, not in shame necessarily, but in recognition that her usual tactics had stopped working. Julie came by that afternoon to drop off a package that had mistakenly been delivered to her place. She leaned against the porch railing while I opened it. "So, it's over?" she asked. "Seems like it. No final act? No surprise lawsuit? No HOA coup?" I shook my head. "Just silence." She smiled. "That's the best ending you could ask for." She was right. That evening, I was closing the gate after letting the dogs in when I noticed something at the corner of my yard. A small, hand-painted sign stuck in the grass near the fence line. I walked over, curious that it read, "Protected by dogs. Trespassers will be sniffed, licked, and possibly ignored." I laughed, loudly. There was no name on the sign, but I had a good idea who'd left it. Probably Paul. Maybe even Lisa. Whoever it was, the message was clear and friendly. A soft boundary. A reminder. As I tucked it deeper into the ground, I realized something I hadn't quite admitted to myself yet. Karen's pool party stunt had annoyed me, sure. It had disrupted my weekend, made me question my trust in neighbors, and almost dragged my dogs into unnecessary trouble. But beneath it all, it had also reminded me of something more important: why boundaries matter, and how quickly things can spiral when they're ignored. I never wanted to be the guy with cameras and a cautious gate lock. I wasn't paranoid. I just liked peace. And now, finally, I had it again. Thor let out a soft woof, not quite a bark, as if to say, "We good?" "Yeah," I told him. "We're good." Inside, the house was quiet. The dogs flopped onto their beds. I poured a glass of water, leaned against the kitchen counter, and exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since that first bark-filled notification. No drama. No fanfare. Just resolution, and that, more than anything, was enough.